Hey guys, Jill here. Welcome back to Whispering Willow Farm. I have recruited Nathan today to help me with this video because he is much more knowledgeable in this area than I am. So a few videos back, I'll link it up here, we talked about having a game plan for your spring garden. Now for me, when I think of having a game plan, I want to go through and figure out aesthetically kind of where I want to put everything, if we need to move trellises and things like that. When Nathan gets a game plan for the garden in the winter time, it is more directed on soil, trying to figure out our soil needs, getting pH soil tests, sending our soil off to the extension office, and really that's kind of his part in game planning for the spring garden. I know a lot of you guys ask us soil questions a lot. We do in-ground gardening. Primarily though, we do raised bed gardening, but I know a lot of you guys are in smaller spaces, you're growing in containers or Greenstalk planters, so we just kind of want to give you guys all the soil knowledge that we have and kind of help you guys figure out when you're kind of determining if you're going to do raised beds in the spring, in ground, or something like a Greenstalk container planting. We just want you guys to be prepared and have the information to kind of suit yourself up for a successful year. So the first type of soil we're going to go over, which would be what you would need if you were growing in containers, so like a grow bag, just plastic containers, Greenstalk, something like that, would be bagged potting soil. Now there are a lot of things you do not want in that potting soil, and there are a lot of things you do want. So Nathan's just going to kind of give you a rundown of things to look for. You definitely want to read the list on the back of that bag.
Yeah, absolutely. So we try to go as organic as possible. So, for instance, when we were filling the Greenstalk Planter,
right?
We went and bought soil. Typically we stay away from Miracle-Gro. Miracle-Gro works, but they also use chemicals in their soil, and so they do have an organic line that we've used in the past to start seeds, I believe. Anytime you can buy the organic, it's going to be better. It's going to be more expensive, but you also know that there's no chemicals that are going to go into that soil that in return go into your food. So the main thing that I would look for if you're doing some sort of container gardening is you want to be able to pick that soil up and it crumble, essentially in your hands. You don't want it too loose. So what I look for, if you go Lowe's, Home Depot, wherever you may buy your soil, there's typically a busted bag. I don't recommend,
busting the bag,
but there's typically always a busted bag. I like to go put my hands on it. If it's too dense, I typically try to stay away from it. Here in Arkansas, we have extremely dense clay soil, and so we typically try to look for things a little more sandy loam. That way when you mix the two together, they create this perfect combination. Mm-hmm. But depending on what your soil's like, if you do compost, obviously you want to use as much as your compost as possible. Right. But you just want to be able to pick that soil up and just kind of crumble it, and it just kind of fall out of your hand. If it's sticky, I would typically try to stay away.
Yeah. So what are some of the ingredients that they need to be looking for on the back of a bag, and some of the ingredients that they need to stay away from?
Yeah. So typically your cheaper soil,
right?
We'll use some sort of clay. Most all of them are going to list compost as an ingredient. That is important. However, not all compost is created equal.
Right.
So some compost may have some processed human waste,
which a lot of people do not. We kind of got in a discussion on this the other day because I was like, I don't want soil that has human waste in it, because ew, that's what I have animals for, that's why we have the rabbits, why do I want human waste? And he was like, well, actually, and he started kind of telling me the benefits of that, which I think would be really important for them to hear as well.
Yeah, so I did a little research on that a couple years ago, and I believe there's a company out of New Jersey or New York or somewhere in that
area.
Yeah. And what they do is they're taking processed human waste, heating it up to this, extreme high temperature, getting all the bad stuff essentially out of it, and they're turning into like little pelletized form. Well, they call it biofertilizer or whatnot, and it's got a low analysis. It's typically like a 2, 3, 4, something small like that. However, it's a continuous feed fertilizer, so it will feed your plants, your whatever, for several months, and it's been tested, and there's no chemicals or anything in it. It goes through I guess it's a heat treat process, maybe, rather than a chemical process. And so I don't think it's bad.
Right. Obviously, we are lovers, not fighters. So you have to figure out what is going to work best for you and what standard you're okay with. I know a lot of people, a lot of my close friends, that is a no. That is a no zone. And I was in that no zone until I kind of heard him out. Now, we have never used human waste in our garden, and honestly, we probably never will.
We've never had to.
Right, we've never had to. But if that's what is available to you and that is what you can get your hands on and you feel okay with that, that's okay. You're trying to figure out what is going to work best for you. In the first season, if this is your first season growing, you're not going to figure it out. I hate to tell you that, but soil is a trial and error process. You're going to figure out, okay, it was too dry. I remember we got super soil one year and we just thought this was going to be the heavens opening and it was just going to be this great abundance for our plants. Turns out it was way too sandy because we didn't add anything with it, and it dried out all of our plants, and I had a really unsuccessful year.
It was too sandy and it was too hot.
Right, it was way too hot, which is why we also are talking about this now, because we do get super soil and we add our compost and stuff, but we're going to get that load dumped pretty soon because we're going to allow it to have several months to kind of not be so hot, decompose before we actually use it on our garden.
Absolutely. And another thing, when you're buying soil, just like when you're buying food in a grocery store, if you're conscious about what you're putting in your body, you're gonna read that list of ingredients. You're gonna read that label. If you're reading the label on the back of a soil bag and something doesn't sit right with you, move along. Right. Go to something else.
Or do a quick Google search and then really find out what that means. A lot of the things that we're looking for in our bag mixes are bone meal, blood meal. We want to see those organic fertilizers and not, the opposite of that. I really don't even know what some of the commercial chemicals are in potting soil.
They'll use granular fertilizer, for instance, urea for nitrogen, potash, for root stimulator, and then some sort of phosphorus, whether it be DAP or I don't know what all they use for.
Yeah. So you're gonna look for like the blood meal is good for phosphorus boost, and so just kind of knowing those things. Obviously, like Nathan said, if it doesn't sit well with you, just move along. We don't really have a good selection of bagged potting mixes. Like most of them I really just don't like.
Yeah.
But you may live in an area where you do, and that's primarily people are getting their soil from bagged mixes. So ask your friends, research that out. Just know in your mind, like, okay, this is where I draw the line. These things I'm okay with, these things I'm not. So we really just recommend that if you're growing in containers. Now, if you are at a place where you have raised beds, buying soil in bags just does not make sense financially because you're going to spend so much money. We get dump truck loads at a time of super soil. Do you want to kind of go into what super soil is and how it's beneficial?
Yeah. So, and another thing on the bag soil before I move along, I'm passionate about helping mom and pop. So if you've got a local nursery, a local cooperative or something like that, check with them first.
Yeah.
They're typically going to be a little more mindful when it comes to things like that than your big box stores.
That is true.
Personally would rather shop mom and pop.
And they do have a better you don't find all the cheap soils there.
That's right.
They're only going to carry a couple, and more than likely they're going to be a higher grade. So that is a really good point. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, because nurseries and your mom and pop places will typically get big loads of compost, and those compost or that compost has typically already gone through the hot process or whatever. So, you know, you get a load of that or a bag of that, you know, it's normally pretty safe to put directly into your garden. So
if they're buying something like super soil where you're buying a truckload, now when I say truckload, you can literally take your vehicle there and they will dump it in the back of your truck with a tractor.
Yeah.
Or you can get, like when we get a lot, we'll hire like a dump truck to come and dump it, and we can do that. You can do that as well, but we also kind of get like a break on that because we are an LLC business. So just if you are an LLC business, maybe you're just starting up your farm but you've already done that, check out those resources because you can get discounts on bulk soil like that. But what is super soil? That, you know, maybe talk about what super soil is, things to look for that could be bad in super soil. As far as just like not necessarily bad, but they're needing to add something to it so they don't have the issue of it drying out, and just the benefits.
Yeah, so to give you an example, local nursery around here has compost, and then they have super soil. And if you're standing looking at both of them side by side, they're going to look the exact same. Dark, rich, black looking soil.
Gold.
Do what?
It's black gold.
Black gold, that's right. So typically with super soil, it's typically a mix of sand, compost, gin trash, meaning cottonseed hulls, you know, just all these, what I call goody, you know. But, however, it depends on when they made that super soil. You know, if they put a lot of hot ingredients in there, in that sand, and this is what we ran into, we had to learn the hard way several years ago, is that we put that directly into our beds, did not mix that with any other compost or any topsoil or anything like that, and what happened was it was so hot. We couldn't put enough water.
We had even mulch too, to try to, you know, keep the water in the soil, and it was just, we had a very difficult time.
It was just too loose to use straight. You know, if we, you know, if we would have done it right, we would have mixed it with some of our Arkansas clay soil, you know, and that would have made the perfect combination. However, we just dumped super soil in our beds. It was way too loose, so as you're watering, it's just draining all down to the bottom. You know, in the Arkansas heat and humidity, the sun was just evaporating. It was just a bad combination. So that soil looks really, really good, you know, but if you dump that directly into a bed, sometimes it may, you know. Yeah,
so what we do is we do the super soil, then we do our compost at home and a layer of topsoil. We mix the three all together, and that seems to have worked really well. Like, super soil is great. In and of itself, it is too dry. It is going to burn up your plant. So I do recommend, you know, and I know several people who have had the same experience. You will have some, it may not be called super soil where you are, but you will have something where you are that is like what we are describing. And so I would just encourage you to make sure you just add it. Even if you just do half super soil, half topsoil, that's going to be way better than just adding that super soil by itself. Plus, you have to think, the more things that you add, the more levels of soil that you add that are adding different things to your plants, the more productive your plants are going to be in the next season.
Right. And this all works for us here.
Right.
You know, if you're in a different area, different zone, you know, your soil's different. You know, let's say, you know, you've got sandy loam dirt, you know, where you're at. You're not going to want to add super soil necessarily. You know, you're going to want to bring in some topsoil, something that's going to give it some substance and not so loose. Right. You know, I want my soil to be loose, but not really, really loose. It's kind of a hard...
You want it to kind of be spongy. Same with when you're starting your seeds. You want to be able to pick up your soil and kind of make it in a fist, and then when you let go, it doesn't all crumble. There are little cracks in there, but kind of just like that spongy texture is what you're looking for, which is why we really recommend, we're telling you guys, because you guys have asked for this content, what type of soil do we use? What do we recommend?
Yeah.
Like Nathan said, we're recommending what has worked for us. We're in zone 7B and in Arkansas, and that may be totally different. So we also really, really recommend, if you already have soil, buy a pH soil test. You can get them on Amazon, relatively cheap. I will link some below. Figure out what your soil's needing and what it's lacking. You can do a soil sample where you actually take soil, you send it off to your local extension office. Most of the time they do them for free. I have heard that they charge maybe $20, but the detailed list of what they do in that soil test is worth the $20 if you have to pay it. So we just really recommend figuring out your soil's needs. So that's really the purpose. The purpose of this video isn't to tell you you need to buy this type of soil if you're in a container. If you're growing in a raised bed, you have to do this. We don't know. We are just giving you our opinion of what's worked for us. What I do know is that if you cater to your soil needs, you will figure out what works best for you and your growing zone and however you're growing. And the only way you're going to do that is really digging into what your soil is made up of and what your plants are thriving in your environment. And you're going to do that through and find that out through a pH soil test or sending soil off to your extension office, which is really, I think it would benefit everyone to do that. I remember when we got our results back, Nathan was like, do you know what any of this means? And I was so overwhelmed. Like, it was so detailed. It told us so much stuff about our soil, but then I knew exactly how I needed to amend my soil and, you know, preparation for the next season. I knew what my soil was high in, so I knew we were going to not do pine shavings for a mulching option this year. Like, it just told us so much stuff that I would have never known had I not just sent off that soil to get tested.
Right. And another reason we're doing this video now, we feel this is a crucial time, or this is when you really need to start getting your soil right. You know, I think sending off a sample of your soil would save you a lot of headache.
A lot of guesswork.
A lot of guesswork, that's right. You know, and this is the time of year you want to do that. You want to start making preparations for your soil to get it right. That way, come springtime, you're not rushing around and, you know, potentially damage your spring summer crops. So.
And also, if this spring is anything like the past spring, we've got a lot more gardeners. We have a lot more people in the world who are really interested in growing their own food, which is amazing. With that comes a few shortages. We always struggle on super soil shortages where we are now. Last year we didn't actually have to have any soil brought in, did we? We didn't have any soil brought in last year.
No.
Yeah. And so this year we probably are going to have some. So that's something that I want to get ahead of now. I want to go ahead and have it dumped here. That way it has time to just kind of decompose, not be hot. But then also I want to be able to have that super soil and that topsoil because I know that my beds are going to need that top dressing. So we really just think that this is when you're kind of lining up that game plan and what you're trying to do, soil really does go alongside that. Now, if you're growing in ground, we have tilled in the past. We prefer no-till, but if you are tilling, there's your soil. You know, like if you're tilling in a place where you've got good soil, use that to your advantage. And maybe you just till it up, throw, you know, a layer of super soil and just till that in. You're pretty low maintenance when it comes to that.
That's right.
You can grow cover crops on your ground, you know, and just be able to kind of press that, mulch that in for your next growing season, which is going to add things that your soil needs. You do not have to go out and buy soil.
That's right.
If you do not have a problem with tilling, that's how you've done it and how your grandparents have done it years before you, that is absolutely fine. Again, it's kind of figuring out that balance of what you're comfortable with. A lot of times some of the best dirt's in the ground. I mean, I know a lot of farmers that will so speak against raised bed gardening because God gave us the ground to grow in. So maybe take a shovel out there and see what the ground is like and work with that. That way you're just using the resources that nature's given you. You're not really having to put any extra money in it. You just have some sweat equity. Now we understand that all soil is not created equal and different growing zones.
That was my words.
That was Nathan's words. And that growing zones play a huge part. Now, we do not want you to watch this video and feel discouraged. And the whole point of this is we want to encourage you guys to feel ready for the next growing season. Nathan over here is so kind and he answers every single comment. I hop on there and I try to do as well as I can. But this man,
not every single comment.
Right, not every single comment. But he handles a lot of that. And so if you guys have questions on like, you know, what your soil is showing and you need kind of direction on where to go and what to add to that, please comment. You know, you can send us an email, leave a comment on this video. Nathan and I will try to get back with you. We just want to kind of help you figure out a direction, start figuring out steps you can take to know exactly what your soil needs are for the next season. That way you have a successful season. Obviously, if you're growing in a container, super soil is not what you want. You have the plastic that's going to get hot. You don't want a sandy soil in there anyways. It's going to completely dry it out and it's not going to be successful. And those are just some of the things that we're trying to help you guys work through now. That way you kind of have those kinks figured out before the spring gets here.
Yeah, and to be completely transparent, you know, my knowledge is pretty good on certain areas. Jill's knowledge is really great on certain areas, but you know, we learn every year. There's something we learn every year.
Yeah.
You know, we hired a farm consultant this year.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you
Soil's
know, so
hard. Figuring out soil.
It is.
And all the organisms that take place in the soil and how important it is, that is something that we will forever be learning. I feel like when you're always in a place where you're teachable, that is a good place to be in. If you guys have recommendations for us, we listen to those things. I want to be in a place where I'm always teachable, because then I'm always in a place where I'm learning and I'm able to expand my knowledge and help someone else. Like Nathan said, we do not know a lot about soil. I know you guys have asked us a lot. We're telling you what we know, and it's not a lot, but I hope that you could even find one thing in this video that you thought, you know, was applicable to you and your garden and your growing space, and it encourages you to kind of dig deeper in your own soil needs.
Yep. And to make another point about, you know, good soil, just like your diet, what you put in your body, you know, you put good, wholesome, healthy foods in your body, you know, the good bacteria in your gut, you know, has to do with your overall health. Well, the same with soil. Absolutely. You know, you want that good bacteria in your soil breaking down all those nutrients and feeding your plants. You know, they go hand in hand, you know, and so be mindful when you are putting things in the ground, you know, as amendments. Don't go buy triple 13. That's going to give you a quick fix, but in the long run, that's going to damage the microorganisms in your soil.
You want to create an environment in your soil that all those beneficial nematodes want to hang out in. You know, like if you have rabbits, use their poop, you know, like compost that. That's actually a dry compost you can actually stick in your soil and it's fine. But if you have farm animals, utilize that. You know, start making compost tea. If you have worms are something that you can literally be in an apartment and do worms in, and it can be so beneficial. Such a wonderful natural fertilizer for your soil. So figure out ways that you can amend your soil in an organic way that is going to add all those beneficial things and create an environment, an ecosystem in your soil that earthworms want to live in, nematodes want to live in, that's just going to make your plants thrive. Like Nathan said, that was a really good analogy. Think of your soil like what you're putting in your body. And when you do that, it kind of changes the whole direction of everything.
That's right.
So we hope this video wasn't overwhelming. We know there was kind of a lot of information missed, but we really didn't want to overwhelm you with a bunch of stuff. This is just kind of something we felt like would help you guys have a game plan with your soil to get ready for the spring. Like we mentioned, if you have any comments, leave them below. But we just hope this encouraged you guys to kind of get started and give you a direction on where to go. But thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. We'll talk to you soon.